Hey, so welcome. Thanks for, joining me here for episode of Gear Guidance. Obviously, first and foremost, just give everyone who doesn't know you, give a little bit of background of, who you are, what you've been doing music career-wise, stuff like that.
Right on. I'm Nick Diener, and I was in a band called the Swellers for like 13 years, and we toured a lot. We stopped playing in 2015, and then I kind of decided I have to get a job. So I realized, hey, I could record people a lot more. So I started doing the studio thing a lot more. And after a couple years, I decided to call it Wonder Studios, and I'll be damned, it's growing in popularity. And it's been cool, man. Yeah. And then just recently, I started Wonder Effects. So that's like a guitar pedal company type deal, which is still very new as far as being a company and knowing what I'm doing at all. So it's that's my newest little pet project. I think that's what you call it. Yeah.
So where I'll start here is I'm always interested because I've been following the Swellers for a while. They were one of my bands growing up.
Oh, cool. Thanks, dude.
So what was your? Because I've seen you post pictures before of it. What was your first rig? Like not even Sweller's rig, but like I want to start playing music. Here's my first shitty rig I've ever bought.
I think like the first thing that was ever kind of like an acceptable rig, like if I was going to bring it over to somebody's house and be like, let's actually jam to where you could hear me, I had a Fender Rock Pro 1000, and it was like the 1x12 combo with an extension 112 cabinet. And it was, just like a kind of a crappy solid state thing, but at the time it was very cool. It was like really affordable, but had that big loud distortion of that crunch. It was like two channels. And at the time, I think right when I got that amp, I had my first like real guitar was a Fender Jag-Stang. Like I had a Washburn Strat copy as like my first electric. And I think back then the Jag-Stang wasn't much more expensive than that first guitar, so it was kind of like the logical step up. And, now they go for like $800-$900, $1,000, like they're really kind of cool guitars. Uh, but yeah, that was the first jam, and then from there, just kind of started. I kind of had to just learn about crap, and it was like very trial and error, especially being so young. I was like 11 and 12 when I was doing all that stuff, and a lot of painful growing pains, buying stuff that I didn't get and selling it, and then yeah, so a lot of stuff I miss.
I still go through that.
Yeah.
So from there, what was your last rig for the Swellers? So where you guys did like your farewell and stuff like that, what were you running at that point?
In the States and stuff, and like my own gear, it was Mesa Mark 5, and I probably played that for like the last four years of the band. And my favorite cab ever that I pretty much got, I think in 2002, and I still have it in the studio today, is a like an old Marshall 412 straight cab with greenbacks in it.
So one of the things, obviously now, Swellers aren't touring anymore. You're not, you've kind of transitioned your life from, the road to home. Has a lot like, are you using the Mark V as much as you would have expected to, or have you found that other things work better in the studio as opposed to when you're out touring?
Dude, I had a huge gear awakening, and like literally everything changed. Like I still like my amp distortion, high powered tube head, Marshall cab, and like my humbucker guitar. That's like, that was my bread and butter, and that was all that I owned and played for like 10 years, because it was all that I had. And we toured so much that it was like I didn't have time to start a new band. I didn't have time to experiment with any new sounds. I didn't want to. Barely even use pedals in that band. I had like a drive pedal that I would kick on every now and then just for some extra noise, and I had a big muff for a couple tours until I broke it. So it was like not much of anything going on. But when I was home and in the studio, people would bring in gear to record, and I would be like, that's really cool. Like a single coil guitar actually sounds rad. I don't have any. I always was just like, that can't play Sweller songs. I'm not going to buy it. Because it really couldn't. It wouldn't sound good with like the meatiness that we had and like the two guitar thing and the amount of drive that we used. So yeah, I was like, okay, cool, man. Like Telecaster, right on. Oh yeah, Jazzmaster. That's like a new thing. Cool. I was like, oh yeah, Strat's cool. Whoa, that has 5 different sounds. Like the in between sounds are rad. And then I never had any use for like a combo amp, even an AC30. I respected them. I dug it for what they were. Never had any use for it. Ended up getting an AC30, and I was just like, oh, this is great. It just does a little bit of everything. I love this thing. So yeah, smaller amps, fewer coils on the guitars, and also, I mean, I played Ernie Ball Music Man guitars for about 13 years, and pretty much exclusively too. Like they were really, really good to us. And to be honest, I got some guitars for free, and if I didn't totally gel with it or vibe with it after a year or two, I'd sell it. And that would pay for my rent in Flint, Michigan for like a third of the year. So like not only did they hook me up with guitars and believe in our band, but like when I was in a snag, it was literally like life support, like having their guitar that turned into some money so I can continue to live in this house and tour. And even after like the band was done touring, it was like, oh, cool. Like the Music Man Armada is a really great guitar. Someone was like, I want to buy that from you. And I was like, okay, all right, whatever. So it was like, sold that guitar. And then I had like a Dan Armstrong Ampeg, like the clear loose sight guitars that they're rad as hell. But I was like, you know what? In my studio, it's just not working. It's just like the intonation's off. They don't stay set up very well. So I was like, okay, I'll sell that. So, sold a Music Man guitar, sold the Dan Armstrong guitar for way more than I bought it for because people want them a lot more now. And then I bought my dream guitar, which was a wine red Les Paul Custom. And so, with that, I was just like, man, this is kind of cool. I don't feel so bad getting rid of gear that I'm not crazy about in order to get stuff that I absolutely have always wanted.
So, favorite pieces of studio equipment that you have. So it can be the amps, it can be like your DAW, it can be your guitars, anything. I know for a lot of people who don't know, you're pretty old school. You do a lot of analog, which is awesome for, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's like I got the analog going in as much as I can. I'm using Pro Tools and stuff. I would love to do the reel-to-reel and the tape thing, but the percentage of people who would be able to record to that well is very low. People just don't really practice their instruments anymore, and bands don't really care about being super tight anymore, which is, where I come in. It's like I could just get them this much tighter and like it works out. But yeah, you can't really hide when you record to tape. So the closest I get is recording everything through the analog gear. And I've recorded like 2 or 3 bands completely live in my studio, which is super fun, but only certain bands can. Like even the Swellers, I prided us on being like a very tight live band. But even us, I'd be like, yeah, maybe let's not record live. Let's, let's lock it in a little bit tighter.
But yeah, what would you say your favorite pieces of equipment are?
I think, starting with like the beginning of the chain, I really just love my Cascade Fathead ribbon mics. It's kind of like a well-known thing that ribbon mics are awesome for overheads or room mics with drums, and especially on guitar cab. But every once in a while, someone comes into the studio and they're just like, what is this? What's it all about? And I'm like, it's a ribbon mic. They're like, that's weird. They never heard of it, or they thought that they were super old school. And I mean, they kind of are, but it's just I compare it to if you're standing over a 412 and you're listening to yourself play the amp in the room. That's what it sounds like when you use a ribbon mic. right up on the cab. But if you put your ear right up against the cab and you play and you go like, whoa, that's kind of like when you're using a 57 or something like that. So it gives you like a realistic response to like what you're hearing next to your amp without pressing your ear right up against the speaker. So it's like a very realistic, kind of warm sort of sound. Love ribbon mics. And then I've got these two Daking, now they call them just like the mic pre EQ. And it's I have two channels of that, the mic pre and the EQ. But these are kind of the older ones. They were called the 52270B, which is, I guess Jeff Daking's one of his kids' birthdays, but it just sounds like a fancy number. And yeah, so I bought those from a guy and his name looked really familiar, and I looked it up, and it was the singer of Sugar Cult. And he's like the producer of like the Neon Trees and stuff. So I was like, yo, dude, are you that guy? And he was like, yeah. He's like, actually, those units you bought from me, the Daking Pre's, were used on the Neon Trees record that did really well. So it's kind of cool that these actual units are like super award-winning, sold like a million record kind of unit. I mean, as far as compressors, the Distressor, I'm using that right now. Like for pretty much everything. I used to have a bunch of different kinds of compressors, and that one just I could just have all distressors and I'd be happy. It doesn't really smash things in an unrealistic way, and it's really easy to use. And then, I just love every guitar and every amp ever, because they all do something good. But yeah, as far as new crazy shit, that the Fractal Axe effects, I was always a firm believer in, like, I would never buy one of those. And then I got one of those Universal Audio aux boxes, which is just kind of like the cab simulator, cab and mic kind of thing. And then I was kind of like, well, I'm like halfway there. And then I kind of got bored of it. And then I was like, well, for the same amount of money, I can get one of these Axe Effects 2s and have a ton of heads and a ton of effects and a ton of cabs, and I could get the new firmware and keep downloading new stuff and make my own. And I was like, okay, well, that seems like a no-brainer. And then seriously, after like a day of playing with it, I was like dialing in my tones, like, because I would say, like, I had like the Mark V and like the greenback kind of thing, when my band was done. But now I would say I'm more into my orange Rockaverb. I have like the Mark III orange Rockaverb. That's like my punk rock high gain head. And I kind of found that similar setting on the Axe Effects and played on it for a little while. And I was just like, cool. Forgot I wasn't playing through a tube amp. Sounds and feels awesome. So like, I'm really excited for some.
They've come a long way since the Line 6 pod, or the first.
Oh my god, yeah. It's funny to think in 20 years if we're like, yo, Axe Effects, and they're gonna laugh and be like, oh my god, you thought that was cool, and like, but it's so like realistic.
Everyone can do the digital shit, but people still want the purest, warm tones that you can only get out of doing it the old way, which is
right.
The benefit to it.
And that's kind of my style too. It's like that Hot Mulligan record that I did. It was like the one before the newest one. People were just like, yeah, it just sounds like a real band playing. Like it sounds like a record from like 1999, not like an overproduced whatever, even though, yeah, there's like hip hop beats and shit that like we created on there. But yeah, it's still kind of like, people sometimes they want that big boombastic drum, like where it doesn't even sound like drums. It just sounds like giant sound effects. And there's nothing against that. It's just not my style.
So transitioning from that, you obviously went studio from touring. Obviously, you started the studio. Now, as someone from Erie, Pennsylvania, do you prefer to call it Wonder Studios or Oneater Studios?
Man, I wanted to call it Oneater Studios. That was the original plan. And then people started just calling it Wonder Studios, and then I would explain to them, yeah, but we're going to call it Oneater. And they're like, oh, cool. And like 1 out of 10 people would be like, Oh yeah, totally, like the movie. And the rest of people would just be like, "Oh, huh." And then it was just awkward and confusing. So I figured calling it Wonder, just I switched it pretty soon after. I was like, all right, we're gonna call it Wonder Studios. And then when people read it, I'd say half the time you get a comment like, "Oh, is it pronounced Oneater?" And I'm like, "See, that's what I wanted." Like as long as we make a joke about Oneater, I'm happy. Like I don't need it to be officially called that and make people like. I mean, yeah, like I told you earlier, like my last name is already hard enough to remember. So if you say Nick Diener at Oneater Studios, like I love it. Like give me that all day. It's not right, but I don't care. I know what you're talking about.
So going from Wonder Studios to Wonder Effects, I know we've talked in the past. You've never done anything like building, like soldering, like anything like
Nope.
that. So what got you into wanting to use or build your own pedals from working in the studio?
I think it was always something I wanted to do. Work on my own outboard gear, work on my own guitars, whatever. But I was always just kind of like, yeah, but I'd have to buy all the stuff. I'd have to devote time to learning it, blah, blah. I'm just not. It was just always one of those things. It's like, it's low down on my list. It's not for me. And then I started just getting tons of ideas over the last few years about an effects pedal. And I had a friend who built effects pedals. And I was just like, hey, would you want to like collaborate and like figure something out? And he's just like, screw you. I don't have time for that. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'll start talking to some other people, and they're like, "Why don't you just do it yourself?" I'm like, "Well, I can't. I don't know how. I don't have anything. I don't do the. I'd have to go to like a school, and I'd have to." Blah, blah, blah. So I just kept like having excuses for not doing it. And then the way I kind of started thinking about it was, I'm a producer in the studio first and foremost, and I just figured out how to engineer, and that's what I did so I could make this my job. I would love to just stand in the back of the room and pace and tell a band what to do, but I can't afford to pay somebody to be in here doing all like the actual hands-on work. So over the last, like 18 years, however long it's been, I've been slowly figuring it out. And so with the pedals, I finally had a couple friends. One of them was Andrew Wilson, who does Camel Tone Electronics. He plays in the Obsessives and the Super Weeks. And he's just like one of the most helpful and just motivating people, so like he kind of just like sparked that in me to be like, give it a try. And he sold me his Nard kit, the Nard Overdrive, which is like the Blue Album in a box. And he's like, and I made videos on how to build it, and you could build this, just see how it goes. And dude, after I built it, I was just like, wow, I can't believe I've been putting this off for so long. That was so zen and so fun, so rewarding. Then I tried to build like 3 or 4 more pedals, and they all didn't work. And I was like, fuck this forever. I'm never doing this again. And then I built like my 5th attempt at something, and it worked. And I went, oh, that was the best. Like, it worked. That rules.
So, I mean, what's your what would you say real quick your favorite type of pedal is to build versus your favorite type to use?
Oh man, I think my favorite type of pedal to build, it might seem lazy, but the ones with the tiniest circuits with the fewest components. So like boosts and like really gnarly, quick, easy fuzzes, just because it's like this, in, out, switch, and then it just is. It's so cool. It's just my favorite feeling. And then also because I look at it and it's like, whoa, cool. Resistors, capacitors, wire, these little chips, like whatever. All these analog components and solder are what like made us go to the moon. We didn't have like crazy ass digital, like virtual reality, like whatever back then. So this stuff that's in this guitar pedal got us to the moon. But now it's just making sick, like stoner doom fuzz. Like it makes you have this appreciation for electronics, and it's making me want to figure out how stuff worked. Like I decided for the first time, I'm going to rip all the pickups out of these 4 guitars and swap some new ones in and change these out. I used to be so intimidated by that stuff, but dude, it all comes down to where does it start? Where does it end? What needs to be grounded, and don't make your solder look like a dickhead, and you should be fine.
So last part, we kind of talked about this. So I'm gonna start doing a segment on this on these episodes I'm gonna call it use, abuse, and trash. So it's basically fuck, marry, kill for gear. So it's kind of off the cuff. I'll give you breakdown of it is use means you can you get to keep that piece of gear forever in perfect condition. No matter how much you use it, it'll always be pristine until the end of time. Abuse means you get to keep that gear, but it's going to get beat to shit mercilessly, and eventually it's not going to work. And trash means you have to throw it out. You can never use it again. All right? So does that make sense? So, yeah, all right. So first one would be Gibson Les Paul, SG, and Explorer.
Oh, man. So this is going to be crazy, but Gibson Les Paul I'm going to use because I just think that's probably the greatest guitar ever. I'm going to have to abuse the Explorer because I think that's like one of the most fun guitars to punch. Like just to kind of like smash when you're, playing it and like really just dig in. It just looks gnarly. And I'm going to even though I just got an SG and I love it so much, I'm going to have to trash the SG because I've owned so many of them in the past.
Strat, Tele, Jazzmaster.
Oh man, a Shevitz. So yeah, I'm going to have to say use Tele. That's probably my like second go-to guitar in the studio next to the Les Paul. I love my Nash Tele, and I also have a Nash Jazzmaster, but I'm going to have to trash the Jazzmaster. I'm going to have to trash master it because it's not a Strat. And I would love to abuse a Strat to the point of it looking like a Stevie Ray Vaughan Strat or like a John Frusciante Strat. And there's 5 pickup selections on there. So it's like if you get bored of one sound and you're on that desert island, that's what I'm like thinking of this, like a desert island thing where it's like I'm just by myself and I have to make ends meet just like with my own brain. So yeah, it's like I got that juiciness, I got the surfiness, and I've got the in-between sounds, like so I could play the Dire Straits riffs, and then I've got the middle one so I could do Sweet Home Alabama, and that's about it.
So, all right, next one. Marshall JCM 800, a JMP, or a JVM?
Oh, man. So I think I'm going to have to trash the JVM just because that's like the newest one and that's what I'm supposed to do. And then, you know what? I'm going to say I'm going to use the JMP and then abuse the 800. Just because I have an 800 that I'm currently using that is being used and is still in such good condition that I don't mind having one to abuse after this one.
Fair enough. All right. So this might be a tough one. Ernie Ball, St. Vincent, Albert Lee, or the Armada?
All right. So I'm going to use the Albert Lee just because that's like one of my tried and true number one guitars. That one means a lot to me. And then, you know what? Because I had the Armada for 2 different kinds of Armadas for a while, I'll have to trash that one just because those didn't make the cut. And then I'd want to abuse the St. Vincent because it has a cool trim on it and looks cool. So that'd be fun to, smash up and play. Because I almost bought one of those not too long ago, and then I had to stop myself and be like, oh, I guess my kid's got to eat, whatever,
All right, so this one might suck. Your 1960 Les Paul Special double cut, your Gold Top LP, or your Nash Tele?
All right, I sold the Gold Top Nash. So I'll have to say trash that. And it wasn't because I didn't like it. It was one of my favorites. But I had the opportunity to make some money, and for this whole COVID thing, I was like, I gotta sell some gear. So
let's change it. Let's do your Wine Red Custom, your Nash Tele, and your double cut your 60s Les Paul Special.
Oh man, so that's tough. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to use the Les Paul Special because it's so old and it's in such good condition. I want to keep it that way, and it's awesome. But, with the intonation, it's a wraparound bridge. It's not the most useful guitar, but luckily I would have the 81 Les Paul Custom to abuse, because dude, it's so screwed up. Like, it's in perfect condition as far as like everything plays right and it's not noisy, but it almost looks like there was a guy with like a spiked gauntlet that played it before me and like banged into the guitar. Like, there's wear on that guitar that looks like it's impossible like to recreate. So
All right. So we'll move to Wonder Pedals. The Rat, the Show Boost, and the One Knob Fuzz.
whoa. Oh man. You know what? I'm gonna say, oh dude, yeah, this is okay. We're gonna use the Show Boost because it's, as you know, I've told you this, it's a really finicky circuit. Of all the pedals that I've built, those are the ones where like I'll test it out and then test it out again and it won't work. Like the next day. And it's like, what? And I've asked my friends and stuff before, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? They're like, dude, the transistor in them, like they're unreliable sometimes. And so I would use that, because if it worked well, it's probably like my favorite guitar tone, like just a slightly dirty, boost. It's just, it's my favorite. And then I would probably say my next thing that I would want, I'd abuse a Rat, just because it's a Rat. It's cool. Play it on bass. And then I would have to trash a One Knob Fuzz, just because it's probably the least useful but like the most fun. So I'm trying to be like an upstanding citizen guitar player.
All right, that's fair. So two more. So last one are so you get Dave Grohl's Gibson Memphis ES 335, Billy Joe Armstrong's Les Paul Jr., or a Tom DeLonge's single humbucker Strat.
Oh wait, do I have to pick one of those, or do I do the abuse?
Abuse, use,
Okay,
trash.
cool.
All right, so, oh man, I'll probably have to trash the Strat, just because I always made fun of the kids who like tried to look exactly like Tom DeLonge or Mark Hoppus in the early 2000s, because we had our band that the Swellers started in 2002, and like every other band we played with looked exactly like Blink-182 and like tried to sound like Blink, but they weren't good enough because they were like 14. But it would be like the dude looked like Tom DeLonge and had a Tom DeLonge Strat. Dude looked like Mark Hoppus. And I'm saying that, which is funny, but we saw old pictures of Anto, the bass player of the Swellers, back in like 2003, like whatever. And dude, he was Mark Hoppus. Like, he had the bass, had the hair. Like, dude, it's so funny, man. Like, just everybody had a phase. And but yeah, I think that might be one of like the cooler guitars. But me now, I would have to say I would have to abuse Billy Joe's Les Paul Jr., because it just looks like a ripper. You just jam on that thing. And then yeah, dude, Dave Grohl's well, yeah, it's, I guess his original, it's a Trini Lopez signature model, which is, dude, it's so cool, man. And then he got his own signature model or whatever, which is in Pelham Blue, which is like the coolest color. So yeah, dude, I'd have to roll with using that thing.
I got one last one here, so this one's a little bit more historic. So it would be Angus Young's SG, Brian May's Red Special, or Chuck Berry's ES 355.
Oh man. So okay, just because the first two are so rad, I'll have to trash Chuck Berry's guitar, which is super legendary. But like, I think if I saw those three guitars, I would have to go touch the other two first. And I would probably abuse the Red Special, because I feel like since he built that guitar himself and it lasted this long, that it's probably going to be fine. But yeah, what a cool guitar tone that is. And then yeah, I would use Angus Young's SG. I had an Angus Young signature SG at one point, and I played it like in like the second year of the Swellers, and it was so great. And I sold a bunch of stuff that I had because we got the Music Man deal. And I was like, I just want to swap out most of what I have for Music Man guitars and whatever, which I really regret doing. You know, now that I'm older, I realize you could still have different companies of guitars if you have an endorsement deal or something. Also, it's wild to think about, like, even just saying that out loud. I was like 16 and we had an endorsement deal. It was like, what? Like, we weren't even touring at the time. They just believed in us. But, and like, yeah, there was this kid, dude. He was a kid who was the A&R guy, and his name was Brian Ball. It's Ernie Ball's grandson. And he's the A&R guy, and we talked like every other day, just on the phone, shot the shit. He was bored. I just wanted to talk to somebody about guitars, and he was rad. And dude, he's the fucking president of the company today. It's insane. Like, yeah, it's like, and look at me now, dude. I have a NASA hat, and I don't work for NASA. That's what... I'm video chatting with the dude at 12:39, and my kid's going to wake me up with a shitty diaper at probably 5 a.m.
Well, that's it, man. I really appreciate your time. Obviously, now for you, you got a lot going on, so shameless plug away. You know, whatever you whenever you want to go over with everyone.
Oh, sweet, man. Well, Wonder Studios is my thing. I'm in Chesaning, Michigan. Come make a record with me. It's fun. If you bring guns, you could like shoot into my cornfield. I got 2 dogs. Or if you don't want to come here, just send me stuff. I'll mix it. I like to mix stuff. And then check out Wonder Effects on Instagram. If you like guitar pedals, stay tuned for some cool stuff coming out. Hopefully soon. Dude, I wanted to say by the middle of the year, but it is the middle of the year now. What's going on? This is weird. But
I love how you say soon when you literally everything you've done is technically soon.
Dude, yeah, that's I'm trying to like slow my roll a little bit so I don't get carried away, but everything's working. It's coming out. It's
Crushing it, man.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on, and it's fun to talk gear.